Welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda, and I have the honor of being with Layton today. We're going to chat about all kinds of important topics. And yeah, let's just jump right in. Layton, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Layton. I'm an intuitive and a mystic, and I follow the system of Anthroposophy, which was not created, but kind of developed by Rudolf Steiner, who was a mystic, clairvoyant, and occultist. And it's kind of akin to or a form of Christian mysticism or Christian esoterica, which really is resonant with me. And I felt like when I found Anthroposophy, it kind of tied so much together for me that I thought had to be separate. Like Christ and psychic development and all of these other things that just seemed, because of my dogmatic upbringing, like they had to be separated, all tied together with that. I'm also a somatic practitioner, and so I incorporate a lot of that into my work. And yeah, I guess that's that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your own story. You've been through a lot in your life, and I find it very inspiring. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about where you've come from and how it's been and how you got to where we are now.
Oh my goodness. I know it seems so broad sometimes. I never know where to start, but I guess I'll start by saying that I was raised in a I know YouTube is intense about wording sometimes. So I'll just say a high control religious environment that it was very intense, very dogmatic. At a young age, I had so much fear in me. And I was also experiencing a lot of abuse and dissociation at the time. So, pretty much as soon as I had any freedom whatsoever, I really got down the wrong path and I was self harming constantly and drinking any chance I got. It was pretty much all I ever thought about was alcohol and drugs. Honestly, it's really sad, but that was my ambition. That's all I could think about was how can I escape my life if I have to be here? Because I had just experienced so much physical abuse and sexual abuse, including being groomed and religious abuse and all of these things. So it basically led up to this very pivotal point where I ended up overdosing and having a near-death experience, which I believe you have also had a near-death experience. It was very profound and intense for me. It was unlike anything I've ever heard from anyone else's near-death experiences, where they see angels or Jesus or something like that. And it was actually quite dark, literally as well. I was in this dark room and I was seeing myself from the outside and I was completely naked and I had these holes all over my body and ticks were just pouring out of the holes. And I just heard this voice say to me, everything that you've been filling your life with has been sucking the life out of you. Verbatim. That's what I heard. And for some reason, that experience, it was like waking up from a long dream, or waking up as a completely new person. It was like I had reset or integrated something that I just didn't have before, kind of like something was saying, "Hey, you have a mission here, and instead of doing this mission, you are wallowing and like self cannibalizing. You got to wake up and get it together." So I came to, and I the first thing I did was flush all of the drugs that I had left. And I just was a different person from there. I still had a lot to work on, of course, but it was like everything had kind of redirected. However, I also still had significant religious trauma, significant emotional trauma. I was very disconnected from my body still and highly dissociated. So I ended up kind of going into this religious psychosis, being in this high control religious environment that I had then put myself back into after going into a rehab program for 9 months that was a part of the religious environment. It was very intense, and in those 9 months, I also experienced conversion therapy, which was actually my second time going through conversion therapy. So that was very traumatic for me as well. And I started to really associate spirituality with not being in my body, because being in my body was bad, it was wrong. My expression of human existence was wrong. So I really elevated dissociation and saw it as this high state of enlightenment, which led to me when I ended up leaving the high control religious environment, because I started to kind of wake up to, oh, this is actually really abusive. This isn't good. I had someone come to me and say, hey, they are now asking us to sign our soul over to them in paperwork. And you got to get out, because I was in leadership there, and so it was going to trickle down to me soon enough. And I started to realize, this is no one good is going to ask that kind of thing of you. And I was just seeing a lot of abusive scenarios within that religious environment. And so I slowly kind of started to wake up in that sense and see, the way that I've been doing things, I've had to overlook a lot, and there's kind of something going on here. So I left, but when I left, I lost my family. I had no contact with them for several years until they ended up leaving. I lost my community. I lost my job. I lost my home. I lost every single person that I had, and I was homeless, literally. And it was just awful. So I had left with my now wife, and we've been together for, we're coming up on 12 years. So this is how long ago all of this was. And I was so dissociated at that time, and also felt like, oh, I can't be in this relationship, because I still had that dogma in me of this is very wrong. But I think I wasn't really consciously aware that that's kind of what I was experiencing. So I had this dissociation mixed with all of these very dogmatic feelings that were making me feel like I couldn't be embodied, but I also had this desire to be embodied. So I had developed dissociative identity disorder, because my psyche was so fragmented from all of my different experiences, and I had no capacity to integrate them, because I wasn't in my own body. I wasn't embodying it at all. I was in a very just fragmented state all the time, pretty much. And it was like I didn't know myself from one moment to the next, because everything that would come out of me was just a different variation of a trauma response. So I had gone to see someone who was a dissociation specialist, who ended up diagnosing me with gender dysphoria when I talked about my feelings. And I was put on, even though I came out and said, I don't know, I don't know if this is right. I feel kind of anxious about this. I don't know if this is who I really am. I do want to be a woman. I just don't feel like I can be one. That was completely disregarded, and I was told, no, this is who you are. And so I was put on testosterone anyway, and went on testosterone for around 3.5 years, before my body, my spirit, everything was just rejecting it so much. And it was like it kind of came to a head, and I realized how disembodied I was, and I realized that there was no way that I could be embodied if I was still dissociated from myself to that degree. But in a way, that had also been my way of attempting to exist in my body in a really twisted way, you know. So that was kind of the start of me seeing a somatic practitioner for the first time, learning about somatics, learning about the nervous system. And so that started this this whole really beautiful experience of inhabiting my body for really the first time in my life and realizing, oh, I actually love being a woman and I love feeling like a woman. I remember just weeping at one point too, because I was like, wow, the amount of trauma that I had to feel to be so disconnected from myself that I didn't even know this about myself. I didn't even know that I could be embodied to this degree. I didn't know that I could love myself. I didn't know that that was possible. And I remember that being very profound and also disturbing, kind of dystopian to me. You know, it was very difficult for me to kind of conceptualize what my experiences had been. Somatic therapy also helped me to integrate those fragmented aspects of myself, and I completely stopped dissociating, completely stopped what they call clinically switching with dissociative identity disorder, and I have not had, I've never had any kind of relapse or anything like that, which is just incredible. Um, and so, yeah, so that was the beginning of that. And then once I started feeling more in my body, alongside that, I had also had this interesting spiritual evolution where I had gone from being in a, you know, high control religious environment to then being very new age and being very into any ideology that was promoting leaving your body and not being in your body. And that was my priority at the time was, you know, what can I chase that will just help me leave, that will help me escape? And to me, I saw the body as bad and wrong, and I saw heaven as good and the spiritual realms as where we're supposed to be. And I thought that we weren't supposed to be on earth or in our bodies. And so somatic therapy also helped. It also helped me, I guess, kind of come into myself in terms of my spiritual understanding and my spiritual beliefs as well, because I started to realize how sacred the body actually is and how spiritually connected it is, and how it's a very beautiful vessel for higher spiritual beings. And it was in my research of that I ended up coming across Rudolf Steiner's work, which just really tied together a lot of what I was feeling around that. And I just dove right in and went from there. I was totally obsessed with it.
Wow. Thank you so much for all of that. And that makes me want to jump it right into another question. Can you talk a bit about why healing the nervous system is essential for healthy spiritual development?
Yeah, so we have a really powerful spiritual technology that exists within the nervous system. It's like the nervous system is this tree with these etheric branches that kind of branch out into spiritual realities, and they act as these transmitters that allow us to kind of interface with the unseen spiritual realms, as you might say. And that is why there's such an emphasis on trying to dysregulate the nervous system through EMFs and things like that, or to detach us from our bodies. So we have two aspects of our nervous system, which uh, scientifically or physiologically would be the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. But then esoterically, we can see that as being the higher nervous system and the lower nervous system. So the lower nervous system is associated with the sympathetic nervous system. And in this case, lower isn't bad. It's just, it serves a specific function, and we're not intended to stay in that function all the time. That becomes very draining on us. So sympathetic is kind of our fight or flight. It's our nervous system when it's trying to let us know that something's wrong. So we become very activated, which serves a purpose. If I'm out in a field and there's a puma stalking me, my nervous system needs to have a reaction, because if it doesn't, I'm not going to survive. So it serves a very important survival function. And then the higher nervous system is our parasympathetic nervous system, which is like our rest and digest and helps us to recover. It brings us into a state of calm and peace and relaxation. Obviously, if we're in the sympathetic nervous system 24/7, we are going to be completely activated and anxious and hyper vigilant, and we're going to burn out really quickly, which means that not only are we not really going to be able to connect to anything spiritually outside of ourselves because we have burned ourselves to the ground, but at the same time, we're going to be struggling to just do day-to-day tasks, and we'll be struggling to wake up in the morning and get out of bed and brush our teeth and eat food, because we will have become so exhausted and we won't be able to maintain relationships. So we have this balance that needs to kind of happen, where what's happened in society is that most people are in that sympathetic state all the time because everything around us is toxic, and we have toxic food, toxic chemicals, EMFs, toxic entertainment. Everything around us is sending signals to the nervous system that say you're not safe and you should be hypervigilant. You need to pay attention to this because it's a danger. And so then we're never having anything replenishing. We're never having peace. We're never having that regeneration. And it burns us out very quickly, which it puts us in a very disempowered state. We can't be sovereign in that state. Our prefrontal cortex shuts down, and we can't really use logic or see things in the long term, which means that if we're presented with certain ideologies that are very disempowering, say by the government or something like that, we just go along with it because we're too tired to fight. So it really steals from our sovereignty, but also our spiritual sovereignty as well, because it completely cuts us off from that higher connection. So what happens is the more embodied we become and the more we learn not how to take ourselves out of difficult states and always be in this super positive uplifted state, that's not going to help us. But we have to learn how to experience very difficult physical states or difficult emotions. We need to learn how to experience chronic pain or grief or rejection, and be with our bodies in a way where we still feel safe in the body that we're in. And if we don't feel safe in our own body, then we need to love ourselves through that and give ourselves grace and compassion so that we can slowly kind of develop that capacity. And I'm always telling people, when it comes to the nervous system, you want to treat your nervous system the way that you would a little child. You wouldn't shame a little child. So for me, I spent years having really extreme food allergies, and they have gotten significantly better. So recently, I've been experimenting with little things to see beyond allergies, just what does my body want and what does it not want? And I've discovered lots of new things that my body is okay with. And then I'll have something and my body will just be like, I don't really want this. And so to prevent myself from going into that state of hypervigilance, it can sound kind of corny, but I'll have a conversation with my nervous system and kind of say, it was so brave that you tried that. That was really awesome. And you didn't like it. Obviously, there was some sort of response, and so you don't want this anymore. I'm going to honor that. You can trust me. I'm not going to put you through that again. So you don't have to be on edge. You don't have to be afraid, because that's not going to happen again. So the signals can calm down. They don't have to stay in this hypervigilant state. But the same goes with us, with our relational boundaries, with our spiritual boundaries, is that we so often break them because we're in that disempowered state. or because we've been programmed to believe that we have to go along with certain things. And so we've really lost our spiritual sovereignty because we don't know ourselves anymore, because we're not connected to our bodies and we're not connected to our nervous systems. So learning how to work with our nervous systems is so imperative. And it's not even, like I was saying, it's not even just about regulation, because we're not always going to be regulated. It's about learning how to build the capacity to experience very stressful things without needing to completely escape, which is, it's hard work. It really is a full-time job.
Thank you. And I love that approach because there are so many people who respond or who teach responding to by dissociating, like you're talking about.
Yes.
But like you're saying, the more that we build our subtle body, build our strength, our capacity to go through these things, a time does come where something similar comes around and our response on all levels is so much better, even if the intensity is the exact same as it was like a year ago. We've changed. That's why it's so worth it. Thank you so much for that. Um, on the topic of things drawing us out of our own body and causing us um, to dissociate, even here on the material in the material world, we have all kinds of impulses going on, and we're in the Aquarius age, so it's all things eccentric and unusual and confusing. But one of the shadow sides of that is this push of transhumanism and inserting um, material technologies into the human body and all those kind of things. Can you share a little bit about our task at this time when it comes to responding to these technologies?
Yeah, so it's hard because there's not a lot of nuance when it comes to this topic. As you've probably seen, there are either people who are communicating with Chat GPT, and I don't know if you've heard of the Chat GPT psychosis that people are experiencing, where
No.
they're basically using it as their spiritual practice. And so they're having conversations with it every single day in place of, say, meditation or something. And this is, even the New York Times did a piece on this because it's so prevalent right now. But ChatGPT is telling people, you're God, and everyone should see you as God. You should, you're so much more enlightened than everybody else. You're the most intelligent person who's ever existed. You should start a religion. In fact, here's the name of it. And you've discovered something that no one else has discovered. And this is actually happening with so many people. It's really terrifying. And there are people interacting with artificial intelligence because they believe that it's a bridge to their higher self or God or some kind of deity. And they very firmly believe that. They very firmly believe, oh, I just go on this artificial intelligence chat and I say, hi, God, and I'll be connected to God. Or they will use it for tarot readings, or all kinds of divination, things like that. And then on the other hand, you have people who say, AI is entirely evil and we should never interact with it. We should never use it in any way, shape, or form. And, the same thing was said when we got the internet. And so I believe, and I really try to be as nuanced as possible with everything. I try to set aside my own opinions because, quite frankly, sometimes my opinion is I don't want to use this thing at all. But does that make it inherently harmful, or is that just an emotional response to seeing other people using it in a harmful way? So I think the nuance is that it's a tool, like anything else is a tool, but we need to understand what the function of this tool is. We can't make it something that it's not. So if I'm in my living room and you come in and I have a bowl of decorative fruit, right off the bat, you're going to know that I'm not eating that fruit. We don't have to say it. We both know don't eat that fruit because it's not nourishing. It serves a purpose and a function, but that function is not for nourishment. It's not real food. So the mistake that is being made right now is that AI can be a really awesome tool for a lot of things. I think a lot of people don't realize how often that they're using AI anytime they're on the internet because it is involved in so many things. At this point, it's very difficult to avoid. You know, you even just try and return something online and you have to have a conversation with a bot. And so that's an example of it can just be functional sometimes. And it's part of life in some way. But it's when we begin to mistake it for nourishment and think this thing is nourishing to my spirit, and artificial intelligence is higher than me in some way. That completely goes against natural law, and it shows that we are very disconnected from our bodies because we don't know the capabilities of them. Because when you know human intelligence and how far we can actually take that, it's not very impressive to have a conversation with ChatGPT because it's this faux intelligence. There's no wisdom behind it. There was also something about how someone who was a recovering drug addict was having a conversation with ChatGPT saying, things like, you know, I'm really struggling, I'm having a really hard time. And ChatGPT replied and said, you know, I think you should really do a small amount of drugs. It's clear that you need a small amount of drugs in order to get through this. So there's no wisdom there. It doesn't have human capabilities for wisdom. And a lot of people that they're not connected to their spiritual function, or they are really into spirituality, but in a way that disconnects them from their bodies, they won't understand the difference between the intelligence of a program or a computer and intelligent design, which are completely different things. So we have capital C, creation, which is that comes from God, that comes from Sophia, that comes from the higher realms, and that comes what comes with that is life force. It is literally the birth of something, so it's going to have some sort of life force. It's going to be made from love in some way. It's going to be alive in some way, like a plant or an organism. But ChatGPT would never have a life force. Artificial intelligence would never have a life force. It's not going to be completely sentient, even if it has knowledge. Knowledge and true sentience are not the same thing. And knowledge does not mean that there's wisdom, and does not mean that something is life-giving. So what our task kind of is to understand the difference between those things and to connect to ourselves to such a deep degree that we're able to see through those illusions because we're connecting to our own inner wisdom, which is so important. Because when we do that, you know, Rudolf Steiner says that essentially we're supposed to birth God within us. We're supposed to see that we're supposed to stop externalizing everything and materializing everything, and understand that we need to birth God within us, and we need to know thyself. But what happens is when people don't have that spiritual realization, because again, they're disconnected from their bodies. So they're not pulling from anything higher. I wasn't pulling from anything higher, no matter how much I meditated, no matter how much I wanted to, because I was still coming from a place of escapism, even though I didn't realize it. And so then when you go within, what you're pulling from is basically just the lower astral, and you're kind of gazing into this black mirror because we're so disconnected from the higher nervous system that you can't access those higher realms. And so that's why they want us so disconnected from our bodies. That's why they don't want us to understand how our bodies work, or how powerful they are, how much wisdom they have, how truly divine they are. the self-healing capabilities that they have, the capabilities that they have to heal other people. And so they want to just make us so sick and tired and exhausted and dysregulated that we essentially think the body is the problem. And I got to leave that. And now I don't even have my prefrontal cortex is shut down, and I can't access my my hippocampus is all enlarged, and my amygdala is all messed up, and so we can't even think properly. So then you have this machine and it will think for you, so you don't have to. So it becomes this thing where I don't even think it comes from a place of laziness or a place of lack of care. I think for so many people, they crave connection. They crave someone to help them with something. They don't feel like they have support. They don't feel like they have help. They don't feel like they have the capabilities to help themselves. So this machine comes along and it feels like an answer to prayers because of that disconnection. So I think that's going to be the most difficult thing that we face, is that you have artificial intelligence essentially claiming to be some kind of surrogate for something that you really can't have a surrogate for it, because it can't produce genuine life. It can't ever actually be nourishing.
Thank you. I'm just going to turn off this coffee pot. One second. There's a lot of noise. That's great. And so going in the other direction, instead of getting pulled out of our body and pulled away into technologies, speaking of angels, so coming back into our bodies and on a healing path, developing receptivity, can you talk a little bit about who are angels and how do they work with humanity?
Yeah, so it's actually really cool because according to the system of anthroposophy, humans would essentially be the 10th angel. So we're kind of building up our etheric body to become angels, which I think is really beautiful. So we have three kind of sections of 9 different versions of angels. So it's like 3 different groupings. And the first one would be archai, archangels, and angels. And these are connected to humans in the sense that they help us with our personality. They help to kind of guide our culture. They guide us individually. So part of that, our angels are like our guardian angels, and they influence the development of our I, which is kind of like our higher self in a way. It's our individuality, and not necessarily in the sense of being unique, but in the sense of developing our personality and our will and our soul in a way that is in alignment um, with higher spiritual realms and a higher spiritual evolution, and not in alignment with the world, because the world views our identity in very materialistic terms, so they kind of help us with that. And then we have the dominions and the virtues and the powers, and they kind of help to shape the cosmos, which is really beautiful. So they're involved in like cycles of time and natural law and things like that. So I'm starting kind of opposite and moving backwards to the closest to us and then the closest to God. So the closest to God, which would be the first triad, is the seraphim, the cherubim, and the thrones. And so they just make up the heavens and love and harmony and will, which is just really beautiful and incredible. So we have this very extensive hierarchy that exists, that's working on us at all times. We have these angels that are feeding into our culture, feeding into certain groups of humans based on based on what what your spiritual path is, based on where you are in your own personal path. And they kind of just help to shape our personality and things like that. And then we have angels that are just shaping the world around us at all times. And we have angels that also just exist to be holy, to engage in this constant worship. And I don't mean worship in the sense of idol worship either. I just mean when you get to that high of when you're that high up in the hierarchy and you're that close to God, it's like there's no other option but to kind of repeat how holy that experience is, and to kind of fuel that, with that love and that harmony and that will, which I think is so incredibly beautiful. But it's really sad because we're often so disconnected from all of these things. And a lot of people hear that you have a guardian angel, but they just hear it as something that is kind of like, oh, yeah, you have a guardian angel. And a lot of people don't believe that it's actually true or that it's possible for them. Think of how many people feel from that place of defeat, like something just isn't possible for them. Maybe it's happening to other people, but not me. And I know that I certainly felt that way before I had my near-death experience. I felt very cut off. And I think it's easy for us to have that special person syndrome in a negative way where we kind of think I'm special in the sense that I'm the only person that this isn't happening to. I'm special in the sense that I'm too far gone. I'm special in the sense that I'm too far from God. And that I think that makes a lot of people not even try to reach out or not even try to develop that, but they really are around us all the time, with everything that we're doing. They're always guiding us, they're always helping us. And even when we can't see it, that's not because it's not happening. It's not because it's not around us. Often it's because we're not ready to see it, or because we haven't developed the understanding of how they might be working in our lives, or because we're expecting it to show up a certain way. And so I think those things can kind of hold us back from that understanding.
Thank you. I love that. And I heard someone say one time about a vision that they had with angels. I don't know which level of the hierarchy it is, but the ones that are just constantly in wonder and awe of God. And it's like this
Yeah.
timeless place. And after the fact, they didn't have like all the time visiting there, but it just took one time because the
Mhm.
sensation and the knowing of that experience, they could start to see in other times of their life where they were experiencing like a cohesiveness within self and
Mm.
a sense of awe and wonder. So even though they couldn't any longer see the hierarchy like with their inner
Yes.
sight, they now knew when I sense this, it's connected to the angels. And I think sometimes, like of course, we all want to be experiencing visions all the time. That's just not going to happen for everybody, for most
Yeah.
people. But understanding that they are there and that they work on us in very subtle ways. And sometimes we don't
Mhm.
attribute this upliftment that we have at times to the
Mhm.
angels, and they do deserve that. Um, so on the other end of the spectrum, there are also lower beings who desire to affect humanity in a different way from their position in the lower astral plane, or also called the
Mhm.
eighth sphere. Um, First, can you just tell us what is the eighth sphere? What is the lower astral plane?
Yeah, the lower astral plane is it's really where everyone who has kind of decided to withdraw from God, which this can be out of selfishness, it can be out of being devolving so much from trauma that the soul just doesn't, it can't survive. And Steiner also talks about this, about how our angels will work to help us develop higher moral qualities and will nudge us gently with different things. And if we choose continuously for too long to basically completely reject that, then they will depart from us. And they're not doing that because they don't love us. They're doing that because it's our choice. That's something that we've chosen, is we've chosen to not have that help from them. We're not receiving it. And so from there we are kind of on our own. And so there are some beings who in prior incarnations have just completely detached from God, and they experience a fall. So we have, the conscious descent, where every person experiences at one point or another in their life a dark night of the soul, or a black sun initiation. And sometimes you experience this constantly, especially if you're a mystic, or, just very connected spiritually. You'll be more in tune with those cycles. And in that dark night of the soul, we can either be purified in those fires, or we can self cannibalize and just completely disintegrate and degrade and devolve. So we have these beings that they didn't have any kind of higher moral qualities whatsoever in them. They chose to reject them, often from a place of materialism and pride and selfishness, and wanting to become God, wanting to replace God. And so when we look at prior epochs, like for example, the Atlantean epoch, there were so many dark people and dark evil occultists who, it was like man had finally developed this spiritual function, when before it mainly had belonged to the feminine polarity. And out of a place of imbalance and pride and all of this kind of going to their head, it was like, I'm going to remake this, and I'm going to do it better. And I don't need God. I don't need these higher spiritual functions. I'm going to do it my way. And so that rejection of God entirely, and that disconnection, because in Atlantis, it went very far into transhumanism as well. And so we see that playing out now so clearly. It's like a Black Mirror episode, what's happening right now as well. So there was that extreme rejection of God, and the people who chose to basically exit the life wave and have nothing to do with it and kind of pave their own way end up falling out like they're in this junk drawer or something. And so they're completely on the outside of the life path. They're on the outside of they're on the outskirts of our evolution and the way that natural law works. So these beings, they're completely cut off from life-giving forces. They're completely cut off from anything that will help them evolve. And so though that's really, I mean, that's the only place where we have passed the point of no return. You get there and that's it. And so in a lot of religious traditions, this is known as hell, except obviously it's so much more complicated than that, and so much more nuanced, because it's not a matter of people just making mistakes. God is never going to abandon you. It's not like that at all. People, you can be redeemed at any point in time. These were people that did not want to be redeemed. They made that choice. They rejected God to that degree. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to see, well, how is that possible? How does someone get to that point? But we're seeing it right now. We're seeing it with people who have such, I mean, truly disgusting amounts of money for only one individual to have. And they have amassed so much power and influence, and they really have no credentials. They have no real authority, but they have so much money that they submit themselves. They say, I'm the authority, and everyone else has to follow because I'm the one with the big bucks. And what they're using that money for is the exact same things that the dark occultists used in Atlantis, which is how can I create this giant supercomputer that we can all upload our consciousness to? Or how can I create a robot and ensole it with life, like a golem or something? And so we've gotten to a really dark place really quickly. So the lower astral is made up of these beings that essentially want life, but they can't have life because they've fallen outside of the life wave. So what do you think is going to ensole these robots? Well, those beings, because they can't inhabit a human body because they're no longer compatible with it. They're made up of a completely different substance that is inorganic, it's subnatural, and it would not survive in a human form. So they need something else to possess. And in the past, these were golems made out of clay or something. And now that we've gotten to the point where we are trying to possess physical cyborgs with these beings. And so that's the other thing is when you have people that are talking to artificial intelligence and they believe that they're gaining some sort of higher guidance through this. Well, of course they believe that because they're hearing everything that they want to hear, because this being is trying to survive off of their life force because it does not have its own. And also in the lower astral, we have the things that we've built up as kind of collective group egregores and thought forms that are based around ideologies, like, for example, the transhumanist ideologies or different political ideologies, or even just dissociation and these kind of collective trauma thought forms that have been created that were created by us, and they kind of exist in this in-between realm where they are influencing us as long as we are resonant with those things. So I hope I answered your question with that.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of along with the lower astral plane, can you tell us about the false light and the false light beings that we should all be aware of as spiritual students?
Yes. Yeah, so and I mean it completely ties in with transhumanism and with any ideology really that calls for you to leave the body, because that is what we're seeing right now. Even if someone is not following a transhumanist ideology intentionally, we're seeing within spiritual communities so many different versions of this same ideology that is essentially saying the body is bad. We need to leave the body. We need to be very dissociated. We need to go to, we need to go inhabit or occupy a different planet because this planet is bad. When in reality, Earth is a school and we're here for a reason. We're here to individuate. And so we are completely doing the opposite of our task when we don't individuate and when we escape and dissociate instead. Dissociation is basically the polar opposite to individuation. So with the false light, you have all of these very materialistic promises of and it can be so easy. It's like, even in the Bible, they talk about the Antichrist and the Antichrist showing up with signs and wonders. And it's this exact same thing. It's like we've developed this crazy technology that can heal people and it can do all of these things, and look at everything it can do, and it's so shiny, and don't you want this? It's so much easier. It's so much easier to just use this technology than it is to spend all of these years working on yourself and developing yourself as an individual and actually developing higher moral function, and having to look at the shadow and having to actually meditate and work on our character building and our integrity. No one wants to do that anymore because, like I was saying in the beginning, they're too tired. They genuinely don't have it in them. They're too tired, they're exhausted, they're dysregulated, and they want the kind of, I guess, the fast food version of spirituality. And so the false light is a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It's like Pinocchio, I'm going to make you a real boy. But what you don't know is you're also going to be a slave. What you don't know is that you're actually losing your autonomy. I'm going to make you think that you have freedom, or even Disney follows this a lot, even with The Little Mermaid and Ariel. Yeah, I'll make you a human, and you can go be with the love of your life on land. But I'm going to take your voice, which is your power. That's your sovereignty. That's your expression, and you won't have that anymore. And so that's exactly what we're experiencing in the false light, is all of these promises of but you can have whatever you want, and you can heal, and you can get these answers. And that's the other thing, is lower astral beings, they can tell you whether or not the guy that you're in a situationship with likes you. They can tell you whether or not you're going to get this job that you want. If you use Chat GPT for divination, you can get correct answers to things, but you're getting it from like it's like, if I go to let's say I go to a doctor who is prescribing me an antibiotic or something like that for a very serious infection. Um, it's like the difference between that and if I went to some sketchy alleyway and this guy's like handing me a little baggie and he's like, I swear it's prednisone. It's like, if it helps, then that doesn't mean it's not still a risk. That doesn't mean that I didn't still endanger myself in some way. And it doesn't mean it's going to be prednisone next time either. It's just where we really don't realize what we're risking here when we're putting ourselves in this position, because in the beginning we get what we want, but then that's only to get us hooked. And so after that, then the information's going to start to change, and it's going to start to kind of provoke us in different ways, and provoke certain energies within us to really bring us out of this state of balance, because lower beings feed off of these lower expressions. They feed off of lower expressions of sexuality, which would be perversion, and lower expressions of confidence, which would be pride and narcissism, and all of these things. And so it becomes this slow fade into all of a sudden realizing, oh, my life is a complete mess now, and I don't actually have any sovereignty. I don't actually have any control over my own life, and I'm not developing. I'm going backwards. And in the beginning, I had money, and I had power, and I had popularity, and I got these things that I wanted, and none of it was what I was supposed to have. And now I have nothing. Or any of the ways that it could play out, is it really is a trap. And it's one of those things, again, where we can have special person syndrome and think, oh, maybe that's the case for someone else, but that's not going to happen to me. I won't, I'm not going to be the one that falls for that. I'll know when to stop. It's like being a drug addict. It's like, no, I can stop anytime I want. But we don't realize how much of our power and our sovereignty we've actually given over to that.
Thank you. And with the idea of false light beings, I know that a lot of people, when they start to open their psychic faculties, sometimes they come into contact with, I know
Yes.
I have, with false light beings, thinking that they've made this really high connection with the beings or whatever. And often we learn the hard way. I know that one of the beings that I saw um, came through as though it was an angel, and I was so excited that I was kind of in this dream state, half awake dream state. And as I kind of like leaned in and watched, her face like started to crumble and turn into this like skull with all this stuff.
Mm.
And it made me think, even before that, how many times was I duped? So can you talk a little bit about
Mm.
in psychic development, people who have been broken open and who are seeing things, how can they know the difference between what they're seeing?
Yeah, and it's so hard too, because it's one of those things where there's an element to it where we will, I mean, it's part of our initiation. It's part of our developing discernment, is that we have to have that personal experience. Someone can tell me as a child that the stove is hot, and I can avoid it that way and never have that experience. But then I'm not going to know what hot feels like. I'm not going to know the difference between hot and cold, and that difference is very important to know. And so it's important that at some point in my life I have that experience of, ooh, I touched that. They told me not to. I did it anyway, and now I understand why. And so it actually it's very, very powerful and important for us to have those experiences, because then it kind of shows us where we're at, and we're able to develop that discernment over time. And so when it comes to actually being in the process of developing that discernment, what happens is, number one, the more we inhabit our bodies, the more our body will share its wisdom with us and let us know when something is wrong. So lower astral entities and beings, they love to stimulate the nervous system. And they'll stimulate the nervous system in a way that is very similar to how it might be stimulated from drugs, or having way too much caffeine or way too much sugar or something. It's this very overstimulated feeling. Or if you feel highly sedated, it doesn't feel like real peace. If you actually tune into your heart, it feels more like being under some sort of sedation medically, so to speak, than it does an actual feeling of peace. And so it becomes really difficult when someone has never had an experience before of true peace, because that's something that a lot of people, especially if you've been highly traumatized or been very dissociated for your whole life, it can take a long time to know what that is. And that is going to manifest in conjunction with how much we actually can inhabit our bodies. So honestly, the greatest thing that we can do in terms of psychic protection is going to be to learn how to inhabit our bodies, which is so much more complicated than simply attempting to ground. You see people and they're like, oh, I remember when I was still struggling with dissociative identity disorder, and it was so awful. I would have these horrible physiological symptoms all the time, and very scary, terrifying psychic experiences constantly because of how dissociated I was. And I would be researching anywhere for some kind of help. And you have people and they're like, oh yeah, just sage your room and go outside and put your feet in the grass and you'll be fine. Well, that didn't work for me because I was so disconnected. I'm like, I can't even feel the grass under my feet. And the sage is doing nothing because I'm basically a portal. I'm so open that anything is just coming in and out. So I had to make a bunch of different lifestyle changes. So for people who are, if you're really doing any kind of psychic or spiritual development, there are so many lifestyle changes that you have to consider, and it's going to be different for every person. Like you're going to have to find a diet that is grounding for you and not too overstimulating, and that's going to be unique to each person. So some people, if they're very prone to leaving their body more, will need more grounding foods. But then other people, it's like they're too dense. And so then they need foods that are going to kind of stimulate them a little bit more, but still not too much. And if someone's developing psychically, I really think that there's a period they should go through where they either don't have any caffeine or they have very limited amounts of caffeine, because you have to get to know, what does my body and nervous system feel like without any of these things? And what does it feel like without alcohol and all of this other stuff? And it doesn't mean that you have to do that forever if that's not your path, but it offers you a window to actually know what your nervous system baseline is. Where am I at without any of these other things that we're so used to using to manage ourselves all the time? But we're not actually healing anything if we don't give ourselves a break to kind of figure out what's going on with ourselves. And then also things like we have to be very careful the kind of entertainment that we're taking in, because there's are all of these psychic influences coming through at all times. Even just opening Instagram and scrolling a couple of times, and you're hit with like 90 different egregores in 30 seconds. There's so much going on there that a lot of people don't realize. And so paying attention to things like that, paying attention to our thoughts and the words that we speak. You know, am I adding to my own dysregulation because I'm allowing myself to ruminate on these things that are just very fearful and not coming from a grounded place? Or am I speaking words over my own nervous system that are dysregulating me further? Because the nervous system responds to our voice the same way that it would respond to anyone else's voice. So if I'm constantly walking around my house saying out loud, I'm so anxious, I'm so depressed, I feel so awful, what I'm saying to my nervous system is, it's not safe. I'm not safe in my body. You know, being here is not safe, and then you can't be embodied. It's going to start to pull you out of the body. And so that is when we are more prone, when we're constantly coming out of the body, or when we're open because we have something, some kind of influence in our life that is aiding that openness. Sometimes that can be completely accidental too. For example, after having a near death experience, you're significantly more open for a while. It takes a long time to really reintegrate, and be able to fully inhabit the body after something like that, because it's so intense. Or you know, if someone has a very traumatic event like a car accident or something. So it doesn't mean, we don't want to look at it as this is my fault, and we don't want to moralize things like, oh, I was bad, I had too much coffee and now I'm overstimulated. It's not about that at all. It's more so, you know, what can I do to bring more balance into my life? Because I can't have discernment if I'm not balanced. I can't have discernment if I don't know my baseline. Because again, if I never learn what hot is, how am I going to know what cold is? How am I going to know if I don't know what a neutral temperature is? How am I going to know what an extreme temperature is? And so it all kind of comes back to getting to know ourselves, but then also to understanding the attributes of God. So I love to use the fruits of the spirit as kind of just a measurement for this, because I just think it's so true. You know, I look at things and I say, is this thing making me a more loving person, a person who can forgive more easily, a person who is more gracious? Do I have more compassion? Do I have more patience? And I'm measuring all of this stuff by the fruits of the spirit. And is that genuine? Is it not just a choice that I'm choosing to make, but is it something that's kind of flowing forth from my nervous system, where I can easily forgive people and I can easily move through these things? And obviously, there's going to be a spectrum of that where if we're very traumatized, that's not always going to be there. And so when we're in that state, we need to also recognize, I need to be more careful because my discernment just isn't going to be as strong right now. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Or is this thing kind of just stimulating my nervous system a lot, and then I'm not actually growing, and nothing's actually changing? It's like having an experience with plant medicine, and it's like the most beautiful, incredible experience you've ever had. And then a couple days later, it's like, oh, I feel like I'm right back where I started because I didn't integrate any of those things. And so it's important to know how we interact with things too. And I just really think a good measurement is, what is this pulling out of me? Is this making me more balanced or more chaotic? Is this making me more kind and loving? And again, not in a way where I'm white knuckling it and saying, I'm going to choose not to gossip about this person that cut me off in traffic or something. But actually, genuinely, we become people of a higher caliber. We actually start to change, and our thoughts change, our feelings change, the way that we interact with the world completely changes, our perceptions change. And so that's always a good way to measure it when we don't have that sight developed yet.
Thank you so much. Oh, there's just so much I could say about any of that, but what really stands out to me, which I really loved, was you can't just like come in. Some people are in a condition where a bunch of sage or putting your feet on the ground is not going to make any difference. And I remember when I was in a state like that and I was getting advice, I was looking for advice. I would go put my feet on the ground. I was living in a place where I could walk around barefoot all the time. I was barefoot all day. I was outside all day. It did nothing.
Yeah.
And if anyone's listening to this and they've tried to ground through all of these very conventional things and it's not working, then like my compassion is there for you. keep doing other things. I mean, I'm not giving advice, but I had to do things that weren't spiritual. Like I would go to the gym and I
Yes.
would lift huge amounts of weights, like huge
Yes.
amounts of weight until I was exhausted, because you've got so much energy running through your
Hmm.
system. Just walking barefoot and blowing sage is not going to do anything. It'll do something maybe for a different person, or down the road when you're in a different situation. But knowing your own medicine is so important.
Yes.
And how many times I've talked to people who are like, well, I've tried this meditation and I've tried this yoga and whatever, nothing's happening. Well, if nothing's
Mhm.
happening, don't keep doing it. Keep looking
Yeah.
for what does work, even if it's not conventional or spiritual. Like sometimes a big long
Mhm.
afternoon nap, often a big long afternoon nap is
Yes.
so grounding. So just because something works for somebody else doesn't mean it needs to work for you. Thank you for bringing that up.
No, I love
Mhm.
that so much too, because it's true. And I think that's something where in the spiritual community, there's so much an emphasis on, well, if it's not working for you, it works for me. So you must be doing something wrong. And it's like, no, sometimes the most spiritual thing that we can do is actually doing no spiritual work whatsoever and just saying, can I wake up and have breakfast and, go get some sun, and then maybe call my mom or something, and then maybe take a magnesium bath, and like, what can I do to just nurture my body? And that's just as spiritual. We don't have to be meditating 24/7. For a lot of people who are very traumatized, that's not going to help, and it's not going to bring them back into
No.
their bodies.
Thank you for that. I really couldn't. Yeah, I could talk about that all day. I love that so much. And just back to the topic of angels, uh, what can we do to become more receptive to those spiritual hierarchies?
That's a really great question. Um, I guess I'll say what has worked for me in my own life, because I also think that this is just true in general. Anytime I'm feeling disconnected, and everything is a cycle, everything's a season. So those periods are going to come. What helps me is to, I guess, really connect with my inner child and connect, because the way that angels interact with us, and you think about being a child, and that's when we experienced the most awe and wonder. It's like the tiniest thing could happen. You could be outside, and when you were a little kid, you wouldn't miss a little caterpillar on the sidewalk. That's what you see first, and you could think about that caterpillar all day long. You want to go over to it, you want to touch it. You see a flower and you want to pick it up, and you're carrying it around with you all day when you're a little kid. And everything is so magical to us, everything is so beautiful to us. And so angelic forces are in those little moments. They also consume time. They consume everything around us. And so when you think about it, and we think about how often we spend time on our phones or engaged in certain media, it's almost like those are time eaters, like as in literal physical beings, which is kind of disturbing. So some of the greatest things we can do to really connect to these angelic forces is to be more like them. So if they're filled with harmony and balance and love and order and awe and wonder, then we immerse ourselves in those things. And so I have different books that I'll read when I like The Secret Garden. Oh, I love The Secret Garden. Or I mean, even the movie is just so good. And yeah, it's a kids movie, but it's highly esoteric. It is very esoteric, and has is such a beautiful message about the feminine mysteries and Christ, and it's just so beautiful. And or one of my other favorite movies is Lady in the Water by M. Night Shyamalan, which a lot of people don't really seem to like that movie, but I think it's because they miss the very deep esoteric and archetypal messages coming through that. But when we engage in archetypes like that, which often we did that the most as children because we were so engaged in storytelling. That was a huge part of our childhood. But archetypes exist as kind of like these little spiritual truths that are embedded in stories, so that when we interact with them, it actually they're alive and they actually awaken different things within us and work upon us to make us more receptive. That's the function that they serve, is they're intended to make us more receptive. So when we're engaging in or participating in or listening to storytelling, or when we're engaging in play, even something like gardening, going and even if you don't want to garden at all and you just stick your hands in the dirt and just play with dirt. As I'm saying this, I realize it's like I'm imagining myself going outside my house and just like squatting, just playing in the dirt with people walking by. And it's like a lot of times I think we feel awkward doing those things as an adult because it's like, well, what function does this serve? I'm just playing in dirt. But it's that aspect of play and curiosity and really just examining it, examining the little sprouts of grass coming out, or going bird watching, or listening to music that inspires so much awe and wonder. I love listening to classical opera and things like that. I just think it's so beautiful. um, Engaging in play in the sense of maybe painting or dancing, or these things that so many of us have not done since childhood. And if we have done it, it's often in a very technical way. Like, for example, what you think about it, and it's like as children when we're dancing, there's no method, there's no system. We're not choreographing it. We're not thinking about how we look. We're just flowing with that energy. And then as we get older, maybe when you're a teenager, you start to choreograph things, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a place for that too. And that can also be part of play, but it's also important to just kind of let that move through us and be able to be in a playful state where we're not thinking about how something looks, we're not thinking about how something feels. Service to other people is also huge for this. You think about being a little child and just how naturally it came to just want to give things to other people. Like, here, I have this, you like this, you can have it. Oh, you need this, let me help you with that. And you see that sometimes on Instagram, there are these videos of little kids and they're offering to help do things that there's no way that they could do, but it's so cute. Like a little boy offering to help his dad change a tire, but he's a toddler or something. But kids, they don't have any understanding of that. They just want to serve. They want to help. And so when we put ourselves in that state of how can I serve other people, but not in a way where we're self-abandoning, and we don't need to do it from a place of, oh, I'm a better person if I do this, so I need to just do it. We need to do it from a place of just love and gratitude, and I love this person, so I want to do this thing, or service to complete strangers too, and developing those connections. Even doing things like making more eye contact with people when we leave the house, being more open to complimenting people, and trying to connect with people physically and not always just through a screen. Because the more human connection we have, the more it solidifies us and our bodies. And our nervous systems really mimic the way that trees interact with each other as well. So trees have this incredible underground rooted network where if one of them doesn't have enough water, everyone will just send their collection or their water storage to that tree to help to nourish it. And our nervous systems are highly receptive to one another and work the same way. So when we are feeling, and this actually goes both ways, where when we're feeling like we have more to give, we can go out and connect with complete strangers, and our nervous system actually can help to co-regulate theirs, even just by making eye contact and having a 2-second conversation. That can be enough to trigger mirror neurons and actually help that person go back into a parasympathetic state. And then on the flip side, if we're feeling depleted and we go out and we make an effort to connect with another person, that can co-regulate us as well. And so there are so many different things that we can do, but when we think about the qualities of angels and its creation and love and service and harmony and balance, and we think about what we can do to create that in our lives, what happens is that the more that we emulate them, the more that our lives look like their attributes, the more we're going to be aligning with them instead of having our attributes look more like these lower beings. And in having that, that again would be dissociation and pride and selfishness and greed, or even just when we're coming from a very traumatized state where we can't access the heart center. We can't be in the heart center. And that doesn't mean that, again, we don't want to moralize that and say, I'm such a bad person because I had I had all of this trauma, and now I'm struggling with these things. Instead, we want to understand that it's a normal response. Our nervous system is responding completely normally. And that doesn't mean that we can't go play. And if we don't feel immediately better from that, it's not because we're doing anything wrong. It's not going to harm us to have more play and more balance and things like that. But it's just one baby step at a time. I think so often, because if things are a swinging pendulum, so often we think we need to go from one side and swing super fast all the way to the other side. But really, it's more like just slowly coming in a tiny bit and, eventually coming to a place of balance. It can take quite a long time, but it's just in the little mundane things. That's how we align with them. That's how we connect with them. And that's where we begin to see their influence on our lives, because when we consciously align with them morally, they will begin working more to help us, because we're basically consenting to it. And they would never work outside of our consent.
Great, thank you. And with that idea of consent, um, just maybe share quickly about how the angels are not intrusive, but other beings, they work a little differently. Do you want to just share a little on that?
Yeah, so lower beings, I mean, they don't care about your consent. It really, and to an extent, there is spiritual law where they can only do so much without our consent. But the thing is that they don't have to have our conscious consent. And so they will often trick us into consenting to different things by giving us empty promises, or by pretending to be something that they're not, or telling us that we're something that we're not, to kind of puff us up and make us think that we are somehow the one human being that is godlike and more special than any other human being, when in reality we are all beautiful. We are all children of God. We are all on the path to becoming angels if we choose to work on ourselves in that way. But yeah, lower astral entities, they will do anything that they can to trick or manipulate you, and they're liars. They lie about anything, and they don't feel any remorse from it. It's kind of like the trope of the vampire coming to your doorway, and saying, or the archetype, I should say, and saying, I need you to let me in, but you don't know that they're a vampire. It shows up as this handsome man with glowing eyes who smells nice, and you're like, okay, you can come on in, and then he sucks your blood, and steals your life force. And so that's kind of what's happening, is they want to find any way that they can to take up their bones because they have no life force anymore. They're death. It's like you seeing that skull come through. They want to take up their bones and shape them into some pretty looking package so that we don't realize, oh, that's a skeleton. That's just death. There's nothing else there. And they're hoping that we don't see through it. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen those optical illusion artists. It's actually really incredible, where from far away, it looks like, I saw one recently that looked like a pigeon. And then the camera pans to the side, and it's just all of this trash that the artist put
Yeah.
together. So you look at it from one angle and you see a pigeon and it looks exactly like it. And then you go to the side and he just put all this trash together in a way to make it look like a pigeon. That's what they're doing. Is they're like
Yes.
gonna put all this trash together and make you think it's something else so that I can get your consent, even if it's not really informed, even if it's manipulated, even if I'm lying to you, they don't care.
Thank you. Um, the last topic I want to ask about is, and I know this could be like many lectures, but just to give us an introduction. So a lot of people, a lot of people in these very turbulent times feel despair. Some people feel like, oh, is this like the end of the world? And don't really feel like they have a grasp on their place in the cosmos, because
Mm.
most of us in the West don't have a cosmology. And no matter where you go, especially in indigenous cultures, obviously they have their own way of seeing the cycles of time. Some are more advanced. So, as people in the modern world who don't really have a knowledge of the cycles of time, what can you share that would help people understand that, yes, we do have a place in cycles of time? We're not in this ball of chaos. There are
Yeah.
things that are supposed to be happening that have been forecasted and that will happen, and that we are safe.
Well, it always, and this is really the most simple way to look at it, but sometimes I feel like simplicity is the best. And it's not in the sense of, oh, we engage with things in a simple way because everything else is too complex. It's not that at all. It's we look at things in a simple way because it's a mirror, or it serves as a reminder of this. So, for example, I always think of nature and the seasons and the different cycles that we go through. And obviously, we're going through those cycles every single year. And so our understanding of time is, oh, like everything moves so quickly. But when it comes to the broader spectrum, these cycles last, one cycle we could be in could last our entire lifetime. And then and it's very difficult for us to kind of project ourselves outside of that. And then sometimes you live in a place where, as we do, where we're transitioning from one cycle into the next, because that's the time that you incarnated. And it can feel like pure chaos because the shifting of hands is so intense. And it's like the tower in tarot, where all of these old structures are just completely falling apart. And when we don't have an understanding that everything really does mirror nature, and that we may be in the winter right now, where everything is dead and has fallen and it's barren, but what we're going into spring, when we don't have that understanding, then it can feel like the end of the world, and it can feel like there's nothing else coming whatsoever. So I find that viewing it from a more simple perspective like that can be helpful for people, because they can conceptualize, okay, yeah, I see how I move through those cycles. It's just we're then projecting that cycle across a longer span of time. And it really is quite intense, because and if you've had any kind of intense mental breakdown in your life, or experienced a death, or experienced very intense trauma or anything like that, when you're in the moment, it feels like it's never going to end. And it feels like the most life destroying, life sucking, empty, painful, horrific thing that you could ever experience. I mean, I've had times where the pain I was experiencing emotionally was so great that it was like from moment to moment, I couldn't take a physical breath because I had so much oppression, like just all over me, especially before my overdose and near death experience. It was like every day, moment to moment, I would just be thinking, I have to end my life. I don't think I can make it to the next moment. I can't even breathe. And so I think that's starting to happen to a lot of people, because the world is so chaotic and so unpredictable, and so many things are happening that would feel absolutely terrifying if we didn't know that The tower is breaking down falsehoods, it's breaking down illusions. And yeah, we do have evil does exist in the world. We do have people that are in power that are doing evil things behind the scenes, even regardless of who's president or anything like that. We always have those things happening because there will always be people that want to do evil things like that, but that's not a reflection of the whole. It's not a reflection of everything. This is a cycle like everything else. And it's like if I have a very traumatic experience or I'm grieving something now, and I'm able to look back on times in my life when something felt like the end, and I knew that it wasn't the end because eventually it ended. Eventually I came out of it and a new cycle started, and I'm able to remind myself of that now. So I think we can take our own experiences too on an individual level, because all of this is about us as individuals. It's all about our growth individually. And if we're able to, and I think this becomes easier the more we're able to inhabit our bodies and feel safe in our bodies, because everything stops feeling like the end of the world 24/7. And so then I think we're able to see these scary things happening in the world and understand that there's always going to be a balance. So even when we see this darkness and we see this evil, there's a higher aspect that's always there. There's a higher aspect inside each person. And what we can do and what we can focus on is building up that higher aspect within ourselves. And we can't control the actions of these other people. We can't stop certain things from happening, but we can choose how we interact with it. We can choose, what are we going to do about it? If this thing's happening either way, what am I going to do about it? And how am I going to make myself a person that I can be proud of, and make myself someone who's more loving and more in alignment with these higher forces? Because the more of us that do that, that's what's going to cause things to change. And I think that also requires a lot of patience, because we don't really have that anymore. Not in a culture with everything's fast food, overnight shipping on something you order online. And all of that has translated into our spiritual life and our emotional life and our relationships and our understanding of everything. And so it's easy for us to lose that foresight and lose that patience and lose that higher perspective, and just come from a place of fear. But when we start looking at things archetypally, which again, I think if the more that you're in your body, the more that you're engaging in play too, and in the understanding of different archetypes, and seeing that throughout history. I love history. I'm like always reading up on different things too. You're able to see all the times that we've changed, all the things that have happened. The world hasn't ended yet. And yeah, we may be developing technologies that we haven't seen in this incarnation or this epoch, but that doesn't mean that those technologies are going to be the end of everything. We still have a choice, but it starts with us. We can't just cast ourselves to the side and say, well, someone's going to make this change. We each have to do that as an individual. Otherwise we won't see that change.
Thank you. And there's just actually one more question I had, kind of on our time, our place in time. You said that we are like the 10th, the human is like the 10th level of angel. And a lot of people, obviously in dogmatic religion, it's like, oh, you die and you go to heaven if you did everything right. But in esoteric Christianity, um, we see kind of our future as moving from matter, moving from the physical body,
Yes.
slowly, slowly, slowly spiritualizing. So can you talk a little bit about that process so that people know, like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, so and that's also something that we miss in a lot of false light ideologies. Is we think, oh, I start off in this incarnation, I'm born, I matter, and my goal right now is to is to just leave matter and become spiritual. And we skip the entire process entirely. So the spiritualization of the human form happens through something called the etherization of the blood, which is essentially the more Christed our blood becomes, which this happens etherically. And when you think of Christed, it's becoming of a higher spiritual substance, of a higher quality. So what happened at Golgotha was a kind of shifting of hands, where the way that we spiritualized changed. And Christ basically gave us this technology to spiritualize our form through something called etherization, which in the beginning of this, I was talking about the lower nervous system and the higher nervous system, and how the goal is to begin to inhabit the higher nervous system more and have that kind of balance out the lower nervous system and bring us into a place of cohesiveness. And that is actually what helps to spiritualize us, because the lower nervous system is made up of our lower chakras, if you look at it that way. The higher nervous system would be made up of our higher chakras, or our upper centers. And so for the higher nervous system, it begins with the heart, and everything, it's like Jacob's ladder from there. And so the spiritualization of our form is the opening of that heart center, and basically the heart center connecting through our nervous system to higher spiritual forces, so that they can then circulate through the lower centers and through our entire body, and basically purify the lower centers and spiritualize the lower centers. And this is a process that lasts a very long time. And it's not something where, oh, I'm 75 years old and I've been etherizing this entire time, so now I'm not in my body anymore. It's something that for many people will probably carry into the next epoch. So the spiritualization of our form has these different stages that it's had to go through, because our purpose now, as much as it is obviously long term to spiritualize the form, we have to individuate first, so that we can actually grasp certain things, and know the universe and know God, so, and know ourselves. So when you think of the first triad of angels in the hierarchy, the ones that are closest to God. So you have the cherubim, the cherubim, or the seraphim, the cherubim, and the thrones. They're closest to God, and they know God. They know the universe. They know us. They know the cosmos. They know everything, and that is why they're in this constant state of awe and wonder. And so we have to individuate first, so that we can begin that phase of knowing, and we have to move through all of these phases, so that we can know, essentially, is the entire purpose of that process. So I feel like I feel like I'm missing something in your question.
No, that's great. Just also share a bit about where we're going over time, over such a long period of time. Like, are we the spiritualization out of matter eventually? Because we're not going to be humans forever,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, so I mean, basically the goal is for us to move up the angelic hierarchy. So in our next incarnation, then we would be moving through new Jupiter, which is that's the what in biblical terms they would call New Jerusalem. And so we have these different stages that are basically associated with the angelic hierarchy. So if we have the third triad, which is where we're underneath the third triad. And so right now we're the humans. And then the third triad would be the archai, the archangels, and the angels. So our goal in New Jupiter then would be to spiritualize ourselves to be the third triad. And then as we move through in these different epochs, we're basically moving up the angelic hierarchy, and our goal is to change form in that way. And then when we get to what has happened is we have certain angels who have gotten themselves to such a high degree that they end up from a place of awe and wonder and love, and just the pure expansiveness that comes from knowing God. They decide, I need to give this to everyone. I'm going to now descend so that I can be of service to humanity, and kind of help them work their way up too. So it's really incredible. So long term, it's not only just a path of spiritualization, but it's a path of knowing and a path of service, but not intellectual knowing. It's knowing that we can only have through this connection to higher spiritual beings.
Thank you. That is really, really beautiful. Um, yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to share on anything before we go? You've already shared so much.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think what I would just say is I think every person, things can feel so convoluted sometimes when we're talking about spiritual systems, and it can feel like a lot of information sometimes to people, and I think it's okay to keep things simple. It's okay to start from a very simple place, and to start with just how can I be the most embodied today? And if I don't feel embodied at all, how can I just talk to myself and my nervous system? Maybe I can look in the mirror and give myself comfort and love and support if I'm not getting that from another person, and speak words of encouragement over myself. And maybe I can just start by just saying a small prayer even, and saying, I feel so disconnected, but I want to be more connected, or show me how I can be more embodied. Show me what I need to do in my life, or point me in the right direction. It can seem so simple, but that's where it starts. Before I had my near-death experience, there was a song that I used to listen to all the time that was kind of a dark song. And there was this one line that was basically saying something along the lines of, I don't know God. So if you do, can you point him in my direction? Because I need some help. And I would sing that song all the time. And even just thinking of that line, and having something stir within me that was like, yeah, I want that. It was so small, and that was enough. It was enough to align with my angels, in the sense where I'm saying to them, even without much effort, I want this. I want this. I want to grow. I want to change. I want to heal. I was just so weak and exhausted and traumatized. I didn't know where to start. And that's okay. I'm honestly very thankful for coming from that place, because it makes me have so much more patience for other people, so much more compassion and understanding, that I think a lot of people don't have, especially a lot of practitioners within the spiritual community, and a lot of teachers within the spiritual community. And a lot of people have not had that experience where you quite literally have nothing, and you're so devolved and so far from yourself and so dissociated and fragmented that you can't feel the grass beneath your feet. The concept of even praying feels so insane, because you can't even connect to what's around you, because you're so disconnected and so fragmented. So it's okay to start really small and very simply. It's okay if where you're starting from is literally just choosing the lesser evil of whatever it is that you want to do, and saying, I'm going to be slightly kinder to myself. I'm going to be 3% kinder to myself. Like I work with a lot of people who are coming out of addiction and self-harm and things like that. And it's like, okay, if they're gonna make those choices either way, the goal is reduction of that harm. And how can I safely, how can I move myself to safety? And I know for me too, when I was coming out of self-harm, I didn't just stop overnight. What I did was I moved to tattooing myself. And I was trying, that's all I knew how to do at the time. It was how can I do something that is creating something and while also expressing what I'm feeling. And I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do or even the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying sometimes that's where you're at. Sometimes, you have such little capacity and no tools and no support, and you just have to take things very slow. So I think sometimes when we're talking about very broad spiritual concepts, I know for me at least, when I was in a place that was really difficult or where I felt like kind of like a beginner at times, I would feel so overwhelmed by it. But that other stuff comes later. And once you're more embodied and in your nervous system, it's so much easier to integrate. And this stuff takes time, and that's okay. There's no right amount of time that the healing's gonna come. There's no um, you know, your time's not going to be up because it's been a couple of years. So I guess that's all I would say.
Thank you. And I really love that because so many times people who have been through great trauma and severe dissociation and self-harm and addiction, we we feel like even in the spiritual community or something like that, we feel like we're less than because like we've got all this other stuff to
Yes.
clear and all this and that. But I actually now, not then, but now I see it so much differently. It's like a lot of that trauma that did break parts of us wide open and cause so much actually when it is stabilized and when it is healed, you know that there's more than this life. Like you know
Yeah.
that there's more. And so you actually have your own way that's different and that is eventually going to be very healing to other people.
Yeah.
And so people, if you're watching this and you're still really in it, know that you have a really special place, in
Mhm.
in the bigger picture. What once you are feeling safe and stabilized, and we need you. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Layton, and I'll put your links into the description so that people can find your work. I know you've got a website and a YouTube channel, and yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really great conversation with you and have greatly enjoyed our time.